Sex is a battlefield. Animals will go to every extreme to mate and ensure their survival. Without sex, a species is history. Its genes a dead end. From violent couplings to sperm wars, to mating rituals, and finally, amazingly, to love. Sex drives evolution, and evolution drives sex. In nature, it really is all about sex. The drive to reproduce shapes not only insect life, but mammals as well, including us. Everywhere in the natural world, sex gets everyone bent out of shape. Animals will do anything to mate. The drive to pass on genes and ensure survival of the species is so strong that it causes evolutionary changes. This process is called sexual selection.
It's a type of natural selection, but it's the kind of selection for the kind of traits that evolve not to survive another day, but to win at the mating game.
To be successful, in evolutionary terms, your genes have to be in the next generation. As soon as you have sexual reproduction, what you're doing is going out into the environment and looking for other individuals that are doing well and trying to get some of their genes into your offspring. You need to assess how everybody in your population is doing in terms of their reproductive output.
The game of courtship in the animal kingdom is largely typecast. For the most part, males display, females choose.
There's not an animal on this planet in the wild that will copulate with anybody. They all have favorites. Too old, too young, too scruffy, too stupid acting, and they won't do it. And for good reason, because an animal only has a few chances to pass their DNA on into tomorrow. And so they want to do it with the kind of individual that will really enable them to survive.
And females can often have really weird criteria by which they choose which male they're going to mate with. Sexual selection has had huge consequences. Males of a species, they have to compete with each other to find a female. It gives rise to a whole different set of behaviors and appearances in animals that compete with other males and try to get a female mate.
For example, a moose uses its antlers to fight other moose in order to win the opportunity to copulate with certain females. So there's two types of traits that evolve for sexual selection. One are traits simply to fight off members of your own gender, and others are traits to attract the opposite sex.
The pressures of sexual selection worked on the male stalk-eyed fly to compete for the largest eye stalk, on the male finch to sing and to show red, on the rhinoceros beetle to grow massive fighting horns, on the male lion to grow his mane, and on the male giraffe to grow a powerful long neck.
Some forms of sexual selection can actually drive species extinct because the traits that females prefer are so elaborate that they actually get in the way of day-to-day lives of males.
Take the case of the Irish elk, the ancient cousin of Europe's fallow deer.
Females really liked big antlers, and so over time, males with large antlers were selected over males with smaller antlers. Over progressive generations, the average size of antlers in the population got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, the antlers got so big that they were at the very limit of what an animal can sustain and still survive in its environment. And ultimately, the Irish elk went extinct, and a lot of people think that it went extinct because its antlers were just too big.
But even after the rams have butt heads and the mating has begun, in some species, the female has more work to do to be sure the goods are delivered.
The female or the male approach each other, then the male mounts the female. After 1-2 seconds, the female starts calling.
German primatologist Donna Pfefferle works with a unique group of wild macaques who live atop the Rock of Gibraltar. She came here to investigate the mystery of why female macaques cry out so loudly during sex. Over 2 mating seasons, she recorded the macaques, focusing on the frequency and intensity of the females' cries. She then looked for differences between the females who made noise and the females who didn't. What she found was extraordinary. Far more of the noisy females became pregnant.
The earlier, the faster, and with the higher peak frequencies the female calls, the more likely the male is to ejaculate.
In fact, males were 10 times more likely to ejaculate with a calling female than with a silent one. Pfefferle concluded that the females evolved the loud sex noises in a clear case of sexual selection. The noises increased the odds of bearing young.
They're screaming and shouting for a reason. If he doesn't ejaculate, then what's going to happen is she's not going to conceive. So what she's got to do is she's got to encourage him.
Eric Shaw has spent years closely observing the Gibraltar macaques, who are known for one thing: sex. They have sex on average once an hour, and they have evolved to use it for social purposes.
Kevin. No, but we've got free-ranging primates here that we know have been here for 300 years. I know, stop panicking. There's a lot of questions that they can answer for us. Be it a question of how to feed them, or be it a question of sex.
For these primates, sex is part of how the community communicates and bonds.
They use their sexuality in a lot of ways like we do, I suppose. You had a male and a female here, and he threatened her because you're a little bit too close to my food. To stop the threat, she presents herself. In other words, take me, I'm yours. Here we go. That was sheer, total submission and passiveness. She presented herself, I'm not a threat. He decided to go all the way this time and accept her submission. And now there's peace in the world.
The macaque community needs order to keep their elaborate social network intact.
There are little families within families, you know. One female will have 5 children over here, another will have 4 over there. But they need this protection, they need this cohesion, they need to move as a troop.
With primates like macaques, sex moves beyond its primary function and is put to many different uses. The scientists call these behaviors sexual currency.
Primates have developed sexual reproduction to an elaborate art. No longer is it just a physical coming together with no consequences other than reproduction. Now it's the fulcrum of many different aspects of primate societies.
A lot of the primates will exchange food for sex, express power with their sexuality, express friendship with their sexuality. Sex is a very powerful exchange mechanism.
The mix of sex for reproduction and social purposes evolved by primates like the macaque set the stage for the human sexuality that was to come. Humans would add one more most unusual layer to the evolution of sex. Human beings began to emerge as distinct from our primate cousins just a few million years ago.
When our ancestors came down out of the trees and began to stand up on 2 feet instead of 4, they also changed some of their sexual anatomy.
Helen Fisher studies the evolution of human sex.
The female vaginal canal is no longer tipped backwards the way it is among chimpanzees. It evolved to move somewhat forward, probably for easier access during the missionary position.
As the female's anatomy changed, so did the male's. The penis had to reach deeper into the female's body, so it evolved to become significantly larger. Today, humans have the biggest penis of any primate and the most highly developed brain.
I think the human beings made their biggest leap in terms of sexuality with the evolution of the brain.
Over time, the human brain grew large, so large that its hard skull became a threat to successful reproduction.
At some point during human evolution, it began to not